Hi, my name is Kayla Reeves, and today I am very excited to share about a project I worked on here at the Thomasville History Center. I was hired to organize the Hopkins Collection and create a corresponding finding aid. This project was generously funded by a 2024 Historical Records grant from the Georgia Historical Records Advisory Council. During this presentation, I hope to share a little bit about the collection, my process in organizing it, and why I think its records are so valuable. First, I would like to start with a little bit of background on the collection itself. The Hopkins Collection is one of the many historical collections housed here at the Thomasville History Center. Named after its primary collector, Elizabeth F. Hopkins, commonly known as Bessie, this collection holds a wealth of records regarding Thomas County history, spanning from the early 1800s through the 1950s. Some examples of the types of documents stored in this collection include deeds, letters, newspaper clippings, scrapbooks, and pamphlets, to name a few. Born in 1872, Bessie Hopkins was the daughter of prominent Thomasville judge and realtor Henry W. Hopkins. Shown here is a picture of her graduation from Bryn Mawr College in 1892. As an adult, Miss Hopkins spent much of her time as a local collector and history enthusiast, interested in all things Thomas County. She was also heavily involved in various local groups, including the Thomasville chapters of the Daughters of the American Revolution, United Daughters of the Confederacy, and the National Huguenot Society. In the summer of 1951, she was hired by the Thomas County Commissioners to write a book detailing the official history of the county. She was 79 years old when the task began and was to be paid $200 a month for her work on the project. Shown here is a Thomasville newspaper article from July 1951, describing the project in its initial stages. After expressing delight that the local government had agreed to fund the creation of a Thomas County history book, the article states that, quote, "It is further evident that the person best qualified to write this history, with the most information and records already preserved, will handle it. Miss Bessie Hopkins is to be paid for a year's work in the compilation of the matter. It may take more than that time, and if so, that will be secured in some manner." Well, the article was right in this prediction, and the project would end up taking much longer than a year. Shown here is a picture of Bessie Hopkins in November 1954, still working on the book project. Sadly, she then sustained an injury in 1955, which further slowed progress on the book. In the face of growing health concerns, Miss Hopkins' role as a paid historian for Thomas County officially ended in January 1957, over 5 years after she had begun the project, and Miss Hopkins would pass away later that year. While she was not able to finish a book of Thomas County history, during her time on the project, Miss Hopkins and her supporters had collected significant records on the cultural, political, and economic history of the region. These records, in addition to her personal notes, make up what is now the Hopkins Collection. This brings us to the 2024-2025 cataloging project. This project aimed to make the collection more accessible to researchers and community members alike. We had two primary objectives. First, we set out to organize the records of the Hopkins Collection into thematic categories and subcategories, grouping similar records together to allow for easier research. Then, we created a detailed finding aid for the collection, which includes a location and brief description for each record in the collection. The Hopkins Collection can be used for a variety of personal or academic interests. For example, at the local level, those interested in their family history or the history of the Thomasville community will find a plethora of relevant records. This includes topics such as local genealogy, military service, religious congregations, social organizations, and real estate records. Moreover, many of these records illuminate national issues from the perspective of one small Southern community. Broader topics such as the Civil War, prohibition, women's suffrage, race relations, and environmental conservation are all present, both in Thomas County history and in the records of the Hopkins Collection. The collection was ultimately divided into 17 main categories, which are shown here. I won't read them all out to you now, but feel free to pause the video if you would like to take a closer look at them. Some of our strongest categories in the collection include our military history, genealogy and family records, government and politics, real estate and legal records, religion, organizations, and local tourism. Moving forward in the presentation, I would like to provide some examples of how the finding aid is organized and the types of specific records that it contains. For example, the military history category is divided into 4 main subcategories. That is the American Civil War, local guard/militia, World War I, and miscellaneous. As an aside, most categories contain a miscellaneous section for records that do not fit neatly into other groups. So for this example, it might include historical records regarding military service during peacetime. Particularly extensive categories may also be subdivided further, such as with the Civil War. You can see that it's broken down into muster rolls and company records, letters, diaries, and reminiscences, as well as miscellaneous Civil War records. One of the nice things about the finding aid is that it is helpful both for researchers looking for something specific or for those who would just like to explore the collection. For example, if you are particularly interested in the Ochlockonee Light Infantry during the Civil War, you would look under Military History, then Civil War, then Muster Rolls and Company Records. The text here on this slide is an example of what you would find in the finding aid. It shows that the collection has 3 records regarding this unit. The original company muster roll, which is also pictured here on the slide, a typed copy of the company muster roll in case you have difficulty with the handwriting, and records regarding the company flag. However, even if you were not specifically seeking out the Ochlockonee Light Infantry, but were simply interested in Civil War history, you could easily follow the finding aid to stumble upon these documents, along with many other companies that are contained in this section of the collection. Before moving on, I want to emphasize that if you want to see the actual records, as is pictured here on the slide, you will need to visit the Thomasville History Center in person. The finding aid lists the text that is presented on the left side of the slide, which will kind of just give you an introduction to what our records contain. Here's another example from the local guard/militia category within military history. Pictured here is an 1890 pamphlet outlining the rules of the local militia, the Thomas Hussars. This is obviously just the cover page of the pamphlet, but again, if you were to visit in person and request to view the pamphlet, you would be able to look through the pages. Besides military history, another prominent category is government and politics. While this category contains a very vast array of topics, I wanted to select one of the more eye-catching issues that I found to talk about during this presentation. In particular, there was an interesting push in the early 20th century for an anti-cow ordinance, which would prohibit cows from roaming around the town. For example, one 1906 Thomasville newspaper, as shown here, titled "Continued Public Improvements and Against the Cow," described local concerns on the matter. Moreover, it listed local candidates that were running on a platform of removing the cows from public spaces in the town. Another example in the Hopkins Collection is this anti-cow petition from 1908, signed by Thomasville residents that wished to remove the cow from public spaces. An excerpt from this petition reads, "Making a cowpen of the entire city is exceedingly unpleasant. The danger from vicious ones to ladies and children is very great, and the frequent depredations upon flower gardens and vegetable gardens, in spite of the best gate fastenings, seem to us to very greatly outweigh any possible benefit." Again, these were just 2 examples of the types of records you could find if you were looking for anti-cow political and local government involvement during the early 20th century. Although, of course, the politics and government section includes a much wider array of issues. Another category we have is local tourism. As many of you may know, tourism played a significant role in Thomas County history, particularly during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. In the Hopkins Collection, we have a lot of advertisements and other records related to this tourism. Pictured here, I have a 1904 pamphlet that was printed by the Thomasville Business League to attract local tourism. It's titled "The City of Pines, Thomasville, Georgia." And again, all that we have pictured here is just the front page of the pamphlet, which is a couple pages in length on its own. Here is another example of an advertisement for local tourism. This record was a distributed leaflet titled "The Cycler's Delight" from 1904, which emphasized Thomas County's natural environment as a bucolic scene for out-of-town visitors. particularly those who like to bike. To read some excerpts, the leaflet states, "Are you going south this winter? Do you ride a bicycle? If yes, then you want to come to Thomasville, Georgia. The bike paths lead through a beautiful high-rolling country covered with pine forests. Going west 5 miles takes you to the Ochlockonee River, a picturesque stream where fishing, swimming, and boating may be enjoyed." So again, these are just some other examples of the kinds of records that we do have available here in the Hopkins Collection. That concludes our presentation. Before moving on, I would really love to give a special thanks to the people that have been supporting this project: Austin Bell, Lisa Clements, Amelia Gallo, Mimi Greitzer, Ann McCudden, Ephraim Rotter, and the Georgia Historical Records Advisory Council. I really hope that you will utilize this online finding aid to browse the collection's available records. Whether for in-depth historical research, a school project, or just personal curiosity, the Hopkins Collection has something for everyone. We hope to see you in the History Center soon, and thank you all for watching this video.